The following presentation is part of the Technology and the Corporation Conference Series, sponsored by MIT's Industrial Liaison Program.
With apologies to any translators, you will forgive me if I speak perhaps a little faster than I ordinarily do on this. The ostensible title, and this is, most of the talks you've heard this afternoon have been more technical. This is really going to be more of an innovation as innovation talk. It's going to be a little more conceptual, heavily business-oriented, but there will be a very significant technical component because really one of the phrases that you've heard referenced, sometimes as a metaphor, sometimes explicitly, is architecture. I think the issue of how one aligns technical architectures with business architectures is going to be key and essential and integral to turning really interesting technical inventions into business innovation. So, this is the ostensible title, Framing the Future. How does one redefine innovation and collaboration in a machine age? This is in honor of the initiative on the digital economy where I hold an appointment at the Sloan School. This is my most important slide. The content of the audience is more important than the content of the talk, particularly in this case. I have a very good idea of what I'm going to be saying this afternoon, and I also know that this audience has had a very long day, and I am not going to unduly add to its length. It is important that you understand my bias in the work that I do. My serious academic background is computer science and economics. I began as your basic normative economics type who focused on how people are supposed to behave. But of course, what does one discover when one tries to apply economics in the real world? People never behave as they're supposed to behave. And so I became much more interested in behavioral economics, a la my former colleague who's now at Duke, Dan Ariely, who wrote Predictably Irrational. Excellent book. You might want to look at Nudge on choice architectures. Richard Thaler, one of the co-authors, has just come out with a memoir called Misbehaving. Excellent. What do I look at when I do research? I look at the behavioral economics of experimentation and innovation in organizations. But I don't do it by spending lots of time with people. As my wife and several former girlfriends will attest, I am not really a people person. You know, I like people, some of my best friends are people, but that is not my competitive advantage, and let's be blunt, you don't go to MIT because you're a people person. However, one of the things that you've seen illustrative throughout the entire day that MIT and its sponsors do exceptionally well is build models, prototypes, and simulations of innovation and invention. And my research emphasizes how do individuals and organizations invest and manage models, prototypes, and simulations as media, as platforms for managing innovation and risk. That turns out to be a very useful and insightful way of getting traction into how technology invention can be turned into business innovation. And this has led to a lot of the work that I do, which is I help organizations design fast and cheap, and this is key, high-impact business experiments, not technical experiments, or more accurately, not just technical experiments, business experiments. Science is a search for truth. Business is a search for value. Science and business are not enemies, but the essence of an experiment, the organizing principle for scientific and technical experiments, are not necessarily the same for business experiments. And so this is the issue. How do we make innovation simpler, safer, i.e. risk, and more scalable? The thrust of the talk today is I am interested in the intersection between, for your organization, your brand, your strategic planning, and innovation. Where does your brand value, where do your strategic plans, and where do your innovation roadmaps intersect? That's where we're going to spend the bulk of the talk today. What is this talk essentially about? This talk is about something that I believe has not been adequately emphasized today on the MIT track, and I think it's a good way to end the day. Because I'll say this without hesitation. Every single person who spoke today, they were people. It's a human being. No robots deliver talks today. That's next year in Madrid. I want us to talk about innovation as a human capital investment. And I'm going to argue, and this is very much in line with what you've heard today, successful technological innovation doesn't just solve a problem or meet a need or fill a gap. It transforms the individuals and organizations, the customers and clients that use them. What way can I illustrate this? I don't know if Vale is here, but I'm going to refer back to the time over 150 years ago when extractive industries ruled national economies and economic growth. Monsieur Leplay was a mining engineer. He was one of the first superintendents of the École de Mines in France. And he also was one of the very first industrial sociologists. I don't often quote the French, and I even more rarely quote industrial sociologists, but this quote was too important to pass up. The most important product of the mines is the miner. Not the metal, not the coal, not the ore. The brilliant insight that Leplay had was that when you look at the economic system of the mine, it is the human capital of the miner and those teams that successfully and cost-effectively extract that ore, that metal, that tin, whatever. We don't live in an era of extraction anymore as the driver for economic growth and definition. We live in a networked age, a media age, a digital age. So I've post-industrially upgraded and updated Monsieur Leplay's quote. The most important product of the network isn't the data that it carries or the Netflix movies that it carries or the bits or the bytes. It's the networker. How many of you have mobile phones or tablets? All of you. You are the most important product of the mobile digital revolution because your devices have changed your human capital stock and capabilities. And this is key because the kind of networks we design and build should reflect and respect the kind of people we want our networkers to come. All of you who are part of social media networks, enterprise networks, these should be understood not just as a way of managing data more efficiently and more effectively. It should be thought of as ways to transform and enhance the composition of the individual and collective human capital. This is where value resides for innovation. This is a long quote. I'll spare you reading it, but it's from the late Gary Becker. In full disclosure, I'm a University of Chicago kind of economist. Gary Becker won the 1992 Nobel Prize in large part for his work in identifying intangible assets and human capital. And the key insight here is, and this is one of the big mistakes that economics made as a discipline, is that the focus on human capital was on labor economics, the human capital of people who created stuff, the human capital of the innovators, of the entrepreneurs, of the employees. That's not wrong, but it's not right. What about our customers' human capital? What about the human capital of our customers and clients? How do we tap into that? How do we exploit that? More importantly, how should we invest in it? I want us to end the day, this full day of discussion of technical invention and innovation at MIT, saying not, geez, these are interesting technologies. How might I better design a product or a service in my business or in my industry and do a Gedanken experiment and say, how should we redesign our customers? How might innovation redesign our customers? How do we use technology to build a better customer? Because that might lead to a better business. I want you to think about innovation not as something that facilitates or enables an economic transaction at higher prices or higher value added. I want you to think of innovations as investments in the human capital, capabilities, and competencies of customers and clients. The best innovations make your customers more valuable. And this is my second most important slide. This is the design heuristic that I encourage you to filter every single presentation you've heard before you today, and forgive my arrogance, what you should do tomorrow. Making customers better makes better customers. If you just make customers better and they don't become better customers, you're doing a great job of philanthropy and charity. Nothing wrong with that if you're a philanthropy or a charity or a certain kind of government agency. If you just make better customers, i.e. extract more from your customers, then you're predatory and exploitive. Don't be surprised if your customers leave you. But if you design innovations, if you market innovations, if you invent innovations that make your customers better in a way that also makes them better customers for you, that is a design and innovation principle that will reap economic benefits even as it makes your customers more effective. A wonderful model for this historically was written over 50 years ago by Ted Levitt, who became the editor of the Harvard Business Review. His article, Marketing Myopia, was the most successful and most reprinted article in the history of the Harvard Business Review. And this article fused together nascent thought about marketing and strategic planning. It was really the first great, a la Peter Drucker, the first great strategic marketing thing. And the essential question, which is now a cliche, by the way, I urge you to look at the article. It's free on Google or Bing. Levitt says, what business are we really in? You know, water, are we in water distribution, water purification? His example was the railroads. Are railroads in the railroad business or in the transport business? Are they in the supply business? Are they in the economic development business? What business are they in? And the problem with this question, of course, is, as the entire theme of this event demonstrates, we do not live in static economic times. These are very dynamic, indeed disruptive times. So the wonderful paradigmatic example he offers is, here you are, you make buggy whips, and this horseless carriage thing starts coming in. Doesn't look good for the horse. Doesn't look good for horse-drawn carriages. What business are you in? Are you in the fine leather goods business? Are you in the animal control business? Are you in the sadomasochism whips business? I just want to see if people are awake at the end of the day. Or are you in the steering business? What's the correct answer? There is no correct answer. You have to choose. By the way, every now and then somebody says, oh, we're in all of those businesses. And you know that person really wants to be in a conglomerate. Okay? You have to choose. Technical disruption, technical innovation forces you to revisit what business are you in. And when we invest in innovation, how do we invest in innovation? We invest in innovation to better define and support the business that we're in. That's how you get an MBA. Guess what? Is that the right question? I'm here to say it's a very good question. It's an excellent question. It doesn't go far enough. I think you need to change the focus, and I think you need to address a question that I addressed in my research, which is, with apologies to Ted Levitt, who do you want your customers to become? Who do you want? When you innovate, what does that innovation ask its user, your customer, to become? If that sounds too vague or hypothetical for you, let's do real-world examples that everybody in this room understands. Everybody in this room knows who Henry Ford is. Everybody in this room who went to school understands that Henry Ford's great revolution was mass production technologies, the Model A, the Model T, the assembly line, the River Rouge, Fordism, transformational. Of course that's true. But economics screwed up. Business history screwed up. Because for all of the discussion of the transformation that mass production enabled, guess what gets left out? The human capital component. What else did Henry Ford invent with mass production? The driver. How many of you drive? All of you drive. Where in the OECD lists of, we talk about productivity factors, but where does the human capital stock fit there? Look at all the kinds of industries and value-creating opportunities that the human capital of driving facilitated and enabled. We, business historians and economists, have done a disservice to the truth by focusing on the production side of the material and not on the human capital side of the capability. This is equally true with Google. May I ask how many of you use Google? All of you use Google. Do you know how Google works? I'll tell you. You work for Google. Google indexes the web how? By looking at what you click on, the links that you make. Google leverages the human capital of its users. That's what the PageRank algorithm, named for Larry Page, one of the co-founders of Google, does. So Google isn't just in the business of enabling search. Google creates searchers. You all work for Google and you like it. I'll offer you a more whimsical example. $6 billion industry, Disney princesses. It began, because it's late in the day, I won't go into the story, but it began at an ice show when this guy who was an executive, Andy Mooney at Nike, went to an ice show, Disney on Ice, in Arizona, which is even hotter than Brazil, and saw little children, little girls dressing up as princesses. And he said, my God, they're dressing up as princesses anyway, let's turn it into a brand. So what does Disney Princess ask little girls to become? Princesses. Which creates an interesting marketing issue, this is what I'm about to say is a true story. I talk with Disney people. If a little girl is a princess, does that make the parents kings and queens or servants to the little princess? This turns out to have serious marketing repercussions. So while it is completely legitimate to ask, what business are they in? Google, Jeff Bezos, Sam Walton, Martha Stewart, Steve Jobs. You need to ask, who do they want their customers to become? These were innovators whose products, services, and experiences were transformative. I'm going to argue, I do argue, that the organizing, integrating principle that everybody in this room faces who takes the innovation messages today seriously is this. How do we align the answers to the questions, what business are we in, with who do we want our customers to become? Enabling alignment is what R&D is going to be about going forward. And I believe that the plethora, the explosion of the digital media technologies, what I was saying, the most valuable product of the network is the networker. Our dominant human capital challenge today is, how do we use innovation to support who we want our customers to become? New technologies create new opportunities to invest in customer futures and future customers. And I'm not going to beat these things into the ground, but look at the portfolio here. We have mobile, we have cloud, we have social, we have big data, we have analytics associated with that. We have the Web 2.0 architectures. We have a trend, 7 or 8 years ago, you'd have said, oh, I'm just one of these elite Westerners, Americans, blah, blah, blah. We have the digital. You guys in Brazil, you're at least on par with America in terms of penetration and absorption and utilization of social media. The IT consumerization created all kinds of platforms for opportunities here. What does mobile ask you to become? What does mobile ask you to become? What does cloud ask your customers to become? For me, because of the work I've done on experimentation, cloud is the greatest medium for rapid prototyping and experimentation in the history of the world. If you are not running experiments and doing simulations using cloud platforms and linking it to mobile, you are leaving money on the table. You are not doing a good job of de-risking technical innovation and risk. What does big data, this plethora of big data mean? What big data means is that nothing is noise. Nothing is noise. How are you exploiting or exploring this as a resource? Socialization is huge. I was just Googling this. Less than 2 years ago, Brazil in the Wall Street Journal is called the social media capital of the universe. I mean, I'm sorry about our coots, but the reality is, my brother works at Facebook. Facebook loves you guys. You may not love Facebook, but they take you very seriously here in Brazil. What does social media ask your customers to become? Does it create opportunities for open innovation and more targeted marketing? What do the architectures of Web 2.0 ask your customers to become? This is a wonderful phrase from Tim O'Reilly. I urge you to look at his work on this, on Web 2.0, even if he's not at MIT. You know, at MIT we are open-minded as well as open-sourced. The service automatically gets better the more people use it. You're not just designing a service to do a job, you're designing the service to get better as your customers become more engaged, as your users become more involved. What does this mean? It means we can explore and exploit the economics of network effects. How do we make it easier for our customers to participate and create connections they see as valuable, whether you're doing it for water, whether you're doing it for energy? How do we make it easier for ourselves to get value from customer participation, contribution, and links? And as we change the economics of data and analytics and Web 2.0 architectures, how do we harvest this? Should we reorganize ourselves around these economics? So it's not just, ooh, we have an interesting innovation, how do we add it to our product line? It's how do the changing economics of innovation shift how we should organize ourselves to be better businesses as well as better innovators. The key architectural component to this, and I'll go a little faster on this, is interoperability. I am a big believer as I go forward and we talk on these things that the internet is not a network. The internet is a network of networks. What facilitates this network of networks and the Internet of Things? It's the API, the Applications Programming Interfaces. If you are not looking at APIs as your platform, portfolio, and enabler for collaboration, openness, design of apps, design of enabling analytics, I think you're making a big error of judgment, because interoperability is key. The ability to provide self-service, one-to-many reusable interfaces on a technical basis inside the organization and outside the organization is extraordinarily valuable. And what we've seen with the API directly maps to the history of IT as we know it, information technology as we know it. Where does it begin? It begins in the back office behind a glass house run by a bunch of nerds with glasses. What happens towards the end? APIs become a point of customer, client, channel, partner, supplier touch. APIs become platforms and wedges and pivots for new value creation. I'm not going to read this to you, but this is a famous, in Silicon Valley, this is a famous memo by Steve Yegge. This is a guy who left Google because he said, and he went to Amazon, and basically said, Google's smart, but Amazon's API philosophy is better than Google's. Amazon does a better job of leveraging APIs for innovation and efficiencies than Google does. My advice to you, take people who've worked at Google who are now at Amazon seriously when they talk about efficiencies, innovation efficiencies. This model has not just been limited to IT, but for materials as well. This gentleman, Jeff Evanson, who I met in Colorado last year, he says, people here have iPhones, you know Gorilla Glass? Gorilla Glass from Corning. Material science company, Corning. Corning uses computational chemistry for modeling and simulation. What's Jeff saying? One of the ways we want to create an open or innovation ecosystem, let's create APIs for glass. Let's create APIs for our software that emulates and simulates glass behavior. Let's think in those terms. Let's not just do a classic model of material science. Let's digitize it. Let's turn glass into a digital network, not just a crystalline network. And so you have to ask, for all of the innovations represented here, particularly in the context of things like Internet of Things, what does interoperability ask Brazil's innovation ecosystem to become? Because I don't care whether you're with Embraer or Natura or Petrobras, this is going to be the way you interconnect with the world. This is going to be the way you're going to be interconnecting inside Brazil, in the region, and beyond. And you're going to be running apps. these kinds of APIs are going to enable all manner of apps. I'll give you a nice digital one. SKF is the world's largest ball bearing manufacturer. By the way, you people know the software Shazam? Shazam, you hear some music, you don't know what it is, you pull Shazam out, and it'll tell you what the song is. The Girl from Ipanema, Grateful Dead. This is a Shazam for ball bearing diagnostics. Think how dangerous it is to have your industrial systems in a bad sound from your industrial equipment. They used machine learning training. They turned people's iPhones and Androids into diagnostic devices. And so now they can say, oh my gosh, this thing is going to crack and break open, shut it down, or it's okay, we'll get a repair person there for within the next 24 hours, or don't worry about it. It's not a meaningful noise. There's another example, and if you don't know Khan Academy, Salman Khan is an MIT grad, of course, and people here know Khan Academy? Excellent. Do your companies have the equivalent of Khan Academies? Are you educating and training your customers and clients how to be better customers and clients? Google set up their first MOOC on analytics because they discovered that people who use Google Analytics were the best customers and most profitable customers for Google, and the most satisfied customers for Google. So, what does this portfolio and array of digital media ask you to become? I think, and this is the virtuous cycle, I think we're moving into a time where you want to create, your organization to create network effects. We have analytics that suggest new ways of reaching into the organization. We have new apps that suggest new ways to analyze user behavior and use. We have new APIs which initiate opportunities to do different kinds of analysis and generate different kinds of apps. You don't manage them separately, you manage them as a virtuous cycle. This is going to be one of the benefits of the rise of interoperability and the rise of network effects associated with interoperability and big data and mobile and all of what happens when you move to a more network world. So I'm going to end with next steps I'm going to suggest. You need to begin not looking at the opportunity, but inside. Innovation, introspection. What kind of an innovator do you want to be? You want to look not just as your vision of your future as an organization, but what's your customer vision of the customer roadmap? How do you want to use your innovations to transform the behaviors, expectations, and norms of your customers and clients? When I say, who do you want your customer to become, it's completely legitimate for you to ask, which customer? Which customers? Exactly right question to ask. These are questions that call for segmentation. Who are your best customers? Who are your typical customers? How do you distinguish your best customers from your typical customers? Financial measures, learning measures, reference measures? How do you want to transform your best customers? Do you want to transform your typical customers into better or best customers? You want to think in these terms because your palette of tools, your portfolio of tools has improved and increased. The paradigm shift I see, and I'm running to the conclusion here, is we are moving from an era away from R&D to ENS. This is Bardeen, Bratton, and Shockley, who won the Nobel for the discovery of the transistor. From research and development to experiment and scale. Networks and network technologies reduce the cost of doing experiments and scaling them. That's important. That changes the economics of how you diffuse, how you distribute an innovation. I'll just do this very quickly. I mentioned Amazon and the recommendation engine earlier. This is the guy who basically did it, Greg Linden. Long story short, the Amazon recommendation engine wasn't some bold, genius idea from the mind of Jeff Bezos. It began as an experiment that originally management wanted to kill. But Amazon had the wit and the grace and the intelligence to learn from an experiment. Does your organization? Will the experiments you do, will they be incremental or transformational? I happen to have written a book on this topic called The Innovator's Hypothesis, well worth looking at on this. This is my last slide for today. It's a quote from Alfred North Whitehead, who went from Cambridge in England to Cambridge in America. Unfortunately, he made an error of judgment. He went to Harvard instead of MIT, but we like him anyway. I like this quote for two reasons. The first is, we're not smarter than our parents. We're not smarter than our grandparents. We have tools, techniques, and technologies that allow us to explore and exploit and experiment innovation opportunity faster, better, and cheaper than they ever could. The second reason I love this quote, it's from 1925. Particularly at the end of this day, does anybody in this room believe that the next 10 years of technical innovation are going to be less interesting than the last 10 years? Shame on us if we don't take advantage of those opportunities. Shame on us if our innovations do not improve the human capital, capabilities, and competencies of our customers and clients. Those are my remarks. Obrigado. I look forward to your very brief and very short questions so that the day can end. Thank you. Obrigado.